All right, what's going on, everybody? It is Zerilath, Steve Zerilath here on TFRLIVEDOTCOM, Trigenesis, my weekly Sunday night shows, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. How you guys doing tonight? It's been good to see you. Last time I was on live, I skipped a week. I had Raven Wolfgar on, and that's sitting in the archives. That'll be uploaded to YouTube in due time once I get all of the cuts together and upload it and such. But today we're doing a special pre-recorded episode with an old colleague in this truth war that we have been in, have gone through, going way back to my history in Revolution Radio. And even though me and Robert never formally worked together, he was good friends with my very good friend from Rev Radio, Noreen Helphand. Noreen is someone that, I know Sean David Morton and Noreen and all the Revolution Radio family, as it were, like real troopers going through what I would call that period of time that would be kind of that Kali Yuga chasm, right? It was like that last part of the ditch before you start climbing back up and get into some sort of Dwarpa at some point. And maybe we're on our way there. My guest tonight is someone who I'm going to perhaps ask that question, and that is astrologer Robert Phoenix. This guy has done some very legendary astrology many years. I've been aware of his work since 2012, the earliest, when I jumped headfirst into the truther movement. But Robert, for 12 years, has been a working astrologer. When RobertPhoenix.com exploded onto the scene as a disruptive force in the realm of mundane global astrology, over that time, he's read over 7,000 personal charts for clients. Driven by a need to serve with a Virgo sun, coupled with the X-ray vision brought on by Scorpio rising, astrology has given him a powerful tool to assist others in their daily lives. Yeah, that's another thing that I identify with. We have the same house makeup. We're both Scorpio ascendants.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
Drawing upon
Wow.
numerous influences, ranging from Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, William Blake to Dane Rudyard and Krishnamurti. He uses an eclectic and multidisciplinarian approach to astrology. Each reading, each session has its own soul, as a spontaneous approach evolves out of each chart. Trained by trance medium Karen Lundegard, well, this can all, these last two passages kind of get in the weeds. I'm really excited to talk to you. Should I read these last two passages, Rob, or do you want to speak up?
Talk. Let's just talk.
All right, let's just talk, my friend, my fellow Scorpion riser.
Yeah, let's
do
it.
Okay, so astrology. There's going to be a lot of people in the TFR audience that won't know who you are. So you always gotta get through those introductions, even if you've been known for forever. So tell us your origin story, sir.
Well, so my origin story as a human is I was born in France in 1960 in a place called Verdun, which was the site of the battle where there were the most recorded loss of lives in modern history. So that's where I came into the world, and we moved. My father was in the army, and so then we moved about a year later, and we went to of all places, New Jersey. We went from France to New Jersey. If I'd had a voice in my family at the time, I would have said, what are you doing? No, let's stay, please. No New Jersey. So we moved to New Jersey, and I was there until probably about almost 4.5 or 5. And we moved to California. And so that would have been 1965. And California was a really interesting place at that time. You could feel the summer of love start to rise, like mercury in a thermometer. You could really feel it in the air. So by the time I was in second grade, which was 1967, we were just maybe, I don't know, maybe 13 miles away from San Francisco. But there was definitely something in the air. I could feel it, and of course everything was psychedelic and paisley. Um, and I remember as a child, being at the elementary school and waiting for, I think it was walking out. It was a bright, kind of shiny spring day, and the young bloods were playing on somebody's car stereo. Come on, people now, smile at each other, everybody get together, try to love one another right now. And I heard that, and it hit me in a way that was like a time signature. I was very aware of the time in a lot of ways, and feeling this incredible love wave. That's when, of course, Uranus and Pluto were in conjunction with one another. It's a very unique time. We've had some conjunctions like Neptune and Uranus during the 1990s, but this is quite different. And there was definitely something happening. Although I wouldn't consider myself a hippie kid, I didn't like hippies. I thought that they were smelly and messy.
Right.
Yeah, but I do remember my parents taking me to the Haight-Ashbury as a young kid. We went there a couple times, and one time we brought my grandparents. It was wild. It was like this kind of writhing, roiling, sort of, ecstatic mob scene from our car. It was very, very wild.
Mm.
And then my father, I think, was kind of a bit of a closet counterculturist. Because every now and then, I remember one time when I think I graduated from 8th grade, and my father took me to Playland by the Sea, which is quite an interesting area out there by the Cliff House, where you get in some very unusual architecture remains. Maybe we can talk about that later. But I remember after we went on the rides at the Cliff House, at Playland by the Sea, which was really seedy, he stopped off in Golden Gate Park, where there was this hippie chick selling a copy of this newspaper called the Berkeley Barb, which was this underground newspaper. I always thought that was interesting. It was like my father was sort of checking into this maybe secret life that he had or something like that. So, that's where that's the genesis of kind of where I started, and feeling very much connected on an energetic level, perhaps maybe not a cultural level, but an energetic level to what was happening. And I had some very unique experiences as a child, and kind of unique insights in a way that only children can have. Like I remember standing by the curb, and somebody was washing their car up the street, so all this water was running down the curb and the gutter. And I asked my father about time, and I said, "Do you think that?" Because I saw the water in the gutter and the curb as being very reminiscent of time, and I knew that there was something happening upstream, right, in this little kind of moment. And I asked my father, "Do you think that the past is still happening?" And he said, "No, I don't think so at all. I think time is time." But those were the kinds of sort of strange little epiphanies that I had when I was young. And then eventually, moved to San Jose, got caught up in the maelstrom of the 70s, led me into the counterculture in a lot of ways. I started to do lots of drugs that I probably shouldn't have.
Right.
And I got very interested in kind of everything that was outside the box. So I was one of those kids that listened to bands nobody heard of, watched movies nobody had seen, read books that people didn't read. And so I was kind of on the edge. It's always been a part of my life, is just being on the edge.
Yeah.
The astrology stuff came much later. I got into a period of my life where I'd gone to this place called Findhorn. Do you know about Findhorn at all?
Findhorn what?
Findhorn is a community in Scotland. It's an alternative community, spiritual alternative community. And I had become very fascinated by it because Andre Gregory in the movie My Dinner with Andre rhapsodized about Findhorn, and I said I have to go to this place. So I
Huh.
eventually went there, and it coincided with a time in my life where I was going through a very powerful spiritual awakening. And so when I came back from Findhorn, I got very interested in systems. And I think I started off with numerology. And
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, and so I was obsessed with numerology. I was obsessed with people's names.
Hmm.
And so people, I would do this stuff at parties, and I could break down their names, their first name, middle name, last name, work with the vowels, work with the consonants, just out of all of my head, and I would do kind of like numerological readings for people on the spot
Nice.
at parties. This is around, I think, maybe 1985, I think, or
Hmm.
84, 85, and then I got into the runes. I was really into the runes, and really just
Oh.
got into understanding the runes, and they really spoke to me.
Wait. So wait,
You
you've
know,
known
and
you've been looking at the Norse runes since the 80s?
oh yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
god. Do you have any content that I've missed where you talk about the runes? Sir, I'm a rune reader. I Galder, I
Well,
divinate, I'm heathen.
yeah, no, I loved doing the rune reading. So that was when Ralph Bloom's book first came out, and
Hmm.
that's when the actual little stones that they put in the little bag were actual stones versus some plaster or Paris mold. And
Right.
so I was fascinated by the runes. They really spoke to me, and
That's amazing.
so yeah, so that was another system. And I think around 24, I started to study astrology, and I studied with this woman who was. It was one of these night courses that I taught at the local high school, and this woman was teaching astrology, and it just felt like something I already knew. I just had to relearn it, and I
Hmm.
didn't do a lot with any of these things until the 90s. And then I think it was around 1990, my ex-wife, who's a beautiful woman, bought me a tarot deck, which is the Voyager deck, which is a really cool deck. And I just found that I had an instant resonance with the deck and
Hmm.
being able to kind of use the images as a point of departure. So then I had another girlfriend a little bit later on give me the Crowley deck, the Thoth deck,
Ooh.
and and
The first
oh,
deck
that
was
was
which
fine.
again? Which one did you get
It
first?
was it's called the Voyager deck,
The Voyager
and
deck.
it's by this guy James Wanless. It's very collagey. It's a cool deck. It's a really cool deck.
Interesting. All right. So you're two decks in and you're not at Rider Waite Smith. You jump. They give you Crowley. All right.
Yeah, so this girlfriend gave me Crowley, and I'm like, man, this is a cool deck. It was the Swiss version with three magicians, right?
Hmm.
And I love the illustrations, and of course the astrological connections to that deck are quite helpful. And during the 90s, I was a really hardcore tarot reader, and I had this really, I would read at things like the Whole Life Expo, and I'd have booths there, but there were people all over the country who would call me, and it was all pre-internet, and I would do readings for them, and they would just send me checks. I think only one person never sent me a check. So I would go to I didn't even have a bank account back then. I would just go to, like, if the check was at a bank that I could take you to, I would go there, and if not, I would go to one of these urban check cashing places and pay them like 15% or whatever. I didn't care. So I did that, and then uh, I started to work with Donna Karen, not the person, but the company. And Donna Karen, who does cosmetics, was really fascinated with things like crystals, and a lot of her bottles with perfume sort of look like crystals. So there was this gal that I knew who was somebody who did these. She was a rep for Donna Karen, so she would do these promotions in Macy's, right? And so she hired me to go to Macy's and read tarot cards in Macy's. And it was, so I would do stuff like that. Like I would do all these kind of promotional things. And it was cool. Like I did tarot from like 1994 to about 2000.
Hmm.
And it was such a great calling card. And then in 96, I traveled across the country in my van, and it was my kind of gypsy dream. And I read tarot cards all across the country. So I've been
Nice.
doing this for a while, and I don't know where you are in your 25-minute slot, But the year is 2008 when I
We got
really get
we got
into
we got
astrology.
we got 10 minutes.
Okay, hold on a second. My girlfriend is calling me.
No worries.
So in 2000, I made a major paradigm shift because I wouldn't say I took the 90s off because I did work, but I kind of wired my life up in a way that I didn't have to have a day job. So from 92 to 96, I managed this crazy apartment building in Oakland at the edge of the hood. And I saw so much stuff during that time. It was really crazy. And then from 96 to 99, I lived in a functional warehouse. It wasn't like a live workspace. It was a real warehouse with forklifts and everything. And I camped out in one of the offices. So basically from 92 to 99, 7 years, I was living in the city, but off the grid. And that was a cool experience because it allowed me to not get sucked into something that I wasn't really into. And I was able to experiment with all these systems. I'm not sure if you could do that today. And I didn't have any, it wasn't like that was my intention. I just knew that I probably wouldn't do well in a corporate environment at that time. So I kind of made my own way. But that all changed in 2000. And I worked for a digital music startup company called eMusic from 2000 until 2005, which was great. I mean, I've always been into music. I've done a lot of interviews with musicians and artists, and that was a way for me to prove to myself that I could be in a very Saturnian environment, like a corporation, and not just survive and thrive in that environment. It was a great time. I traveled all over the world and met all kinds of artists and bands and labels and went to all these festivals, and it was great. Life is what it is, but in some ways it was too short. I started working there in 2000, and at some point in 2000, I lived in this place called La Honda, where really the 60s were born. That's where Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters had their house. And he was, of course, taking LSD from Stanford and having these electric Kool-Aid acid testers. So that's where I was living. And I would drive over the hill to my job in Redwood City. And I did this for about 2 years. And I wish it could have been a bit longer because I loved it. It was great. I lived in the Redwoods, and I was not far from the beach, and I had a job that I really loved. But, all good things must come to an end. So I did that until 2005. And then I became a stay-at-home dad and had a bit of a crisis, actually. I had Saturn going through my 8th house. It was 44. I was going through the Saturn opposition. And I knew that I had to change my life. And clearly having a child did that. And I'll skip the boring parts, but in 2008, when there was a presidential election between Barack Obama and John McCain, a woman named Sarah Palin was named John McCain's vice president and running mate. And I had a blog at that time, but I wasn't really doing a lot with it. I was starting to kind of experiment with it. And I thought to myself, well, why don't I look at Sarah Palin's chart? Let's do this. I don't know who this person is, but let me try to break down their chart. So I did that. And of course, I was paying close attention to my stats back in the day. And all of a sudden, I saw that the hits on my website went through the roof. I'm like, what is going on here? And I found out that there was this woman who I'm still friends with to this day, Elsa. And back then, the internet was quite different. And her blog was the go-to place because she would scrape all these other blogs for her newsfeed. So she was always scraping my blog. And the more she scraped, the more that I wrote. The more she scraped, the more that I wrote. And I got into a very intensive writing period during that time. A lot of that is still on my website. And somebody asked me for a reading. And I said, okay, how am I going to do this? So I got wired up. And then I remember recording it on iTunes, GarageBand. And then I figured out how to use Google and their Drive. And then I sent them the reading, and they paid me for it. So I thought, okay, well, let me wire up PayPal and do my website. And that's how it all started. And that was around 2008. By 2010, I had gotten a divorce. I'll give you a real heavy astrological transit. I had Saturn going over my Pluto in the ninth house just before it was going into my 10th house. And during that time, I had picked up another internet digital music job, which I hated. And I wound up getting fired from that job, pretty much. Laid off, but was really fired. I got a divorce, and my father died, right? So Pluto crossing, Saturn crossing my Pluto, Saturn being the father, everything fell apart. And yet everything came together because that's when Saturn entered my 10th house, and that's when my astrological practice and work really started to take off. And that was in 2010.
Yeah. You would have had, that would have been a manifestation of Uaj, the rune.
Yeah.
Yeah. Death and rebirth, and all that, all the scorpionic things involved with it. All right.
So there you go. That's how I got to astrology, and I just kept banging away at it. And the other thing is that I realized that it's so funny to think back then, but I realized that a lot of people who were in the astrological world were very liberal, and I lived, just on the outskirts of Marin County, so I knew a lot of like liberal Marin County New Agers who I kind of despised a little bit, actually. Some of them were cool people, and some of them are still friends, but some of them were just, outright phonies. So everything was kind of perceived through a very, warm and fuzzy, everything is love, everyone is love kind of lens. And people like Marianne Williamson and Deepak Chopra and Tony Robbins, they were all very big. And I was doing a lot of writing back then, taking these people on because they had the temerity to declare themselves our spiritual leaders. And I thought, if anything, they were spiritual traitors, and they're never addressing the real issues that we as a society were really going through. And I have a lot of content on my website that goes back to that time. I was very angry with these people. And none of them are really all that relevant now, even though Marianne Williamson likes to think that she has a chance to win the presidency.
Yeah, she's still in the game. Yeah, I think I heard something about her like that. Like I know. Like the only thing I recognized about her, there was one point in 2016 where she was kind of starting to get it, allegedly, because of because of how the Democrat Party treated her.
Yeah. No, I it's like, oh, look at this. Marianne Williamson is getting outside of her sandbox a little bit. Oh, isn't this interesting? And then they kind of bitch slapped her and put her back in. And now she's all in, right? She's all in with their agenda. A friend of mine grew up with her in Houston.
Yeah.
And she's a rich little girl from River Oaks in Houston.
Okay. That's very interesting, right? So like, are you having basically astrological battles out there? Because that's got to be. I would have to say that's got to be something Jupiterian, right? To state it like that, because that's having this very high virtuous standard about astrology itself, right?
Not too often. I mean, it was really interesting back in like 2010, 2011. There was a big astrological community on Facebook that I was a part of, and very quickly I realized that I was not like them. I always viewed astrology as just part of the bag, as the kids say.
Yeah. 90 seconds, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be a healer, if you were going to be, for lack of a better term, a shaman or somebody who is engaged in the psychic and physical health of the community, astrology would be a part of it. And so that's how I always saw myself. And a lot of these people had no understanding or clue about that. So I kind of separated out from them because I didn't feel like I had a lot in common with them. And there's only a handful of astrologers that I But I'll tell you what's really interesting, though, Steve, is that there's a whole new wave of young astrologers that are coming up,
Yeah.
and they're hungry. They're hungry, and as they say, they're based.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's my work now, is working with these Gen Zers who are so brilliant.
Yeah, and
And
Gen A
yeah.
apparently too. I saw your Gen A interview. We got about 30 seconds, by the way.
Oh yeah, Gen A, that Axel, man, he's a piece of work. But we can talk more about that after the break.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Let's get ready for that because we're about to hit the session mark, which should be lining up nicely with the break if I know what the heck I am doing with my timing. I do have a Saturn retrograde, but I think in my progressive I've straightened it out. So maybe I've finally figured out timing. All right, welcome back, everybody. It is the bottom of the first hour here on Trigenesis with me, Zerilath, and we are having a conversation with my old colleague and new friend, Robert Phoenix. And we've been spending the first segment of the show largely going through kind of just his origin stories and where he gets his way about it, and we were talking about how there's a lot of new astrology coming out that isn't like what old astrology was, which was predominantly I think he's used the word liberal on the left. And of course, like my thinking on that is that, like, ideologically speaking, like, there weren't non-Abrahamic conservatives, in the culture for a long time. Now there's conservatives that are heathen and occultists and shamans, especially the shamans. I mean, you almost, it's like shamanism just doesn't even work unless you're like conservative. The way it all pans out with being pro-life and all that stuff. But yeah, but like, because the Abrahamics were the only type of people that had conservative values, and they are told to be anti-astrology. It's in the laws that they believe are laws for them, and I think that's the main reason why, right? Like, this is a new era popping up where the meanings of liberal and conservative are different, and the kinds of people that are liberal and conservative are different. And I know that on your show, as we go through these ebb and flows, especially when we're talking about the outer planets, you're watching those trends as they shift generation to generation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The outer planets, particularly Pluto, are the sort of the calling cards for that generation. And you were talking about Gen A just before we went to break. And Gen A shows up in 2009 when Pluto goes into Capricorn. And technically speaking, you could still have a Gen A kid, even though we've already had an ingress into Aquarius not long ago, which was a trip. But yeah, these kids from roughly 2009 to 2023, 2024, finally when Pluto makes its last ingress into Aquarius, and they're really different. They're old souls. The Gen A kids are really advanced, and I started clocking them when they started showing up and watching them at 2, 3, 4. And I was really watching these little beings really fully embody their physical nature. Like, they were just super grounded.
Yeah.
And they're super, super grounded. And they were also, I think they were born with the sense that they knew who they were. And so the planets that were next to them, they went through a run with Uranus in the sign of Aries, right? So Uranus went into Aries in 2011, and Neptune went into Pisces in 2011. It was right around 311 in Fukushima when those those monster outer planets changed signs. So if you go back to that period of time, which was like 2010, 2011,
Right.
2011, 2012, 2013, and you had this very intense cardinal cross that was happening. So you had Pluto in Capricorn, Uranus in Aries, Saturn in Libra, and Jupiter was in Cancer. Of course, the Jupiter cycle is only 1 year, but those other three planets would form a T-square for the almost the entirety of Saturn's transit through Libra, which was from 2012 to 2015. And those kids that were born prior to then, like 2009, 2010, 2011, those are the oldest children that went through COVID, right? And that T-square is a ticking time bomb, right? A Uranus-Pluto square with Uranus in Aries, Pluto in Capricorn, Saturn in Libra. So I know for a fact that there are kids who right now would be 13, 14 years old, who had their lives interrupted and are not happy.
Yeah.
And they're taking names. And I'm telling you, when these kids, and I know this young gal here in the Hill Country, and she started to work with these kids and teach them the Constitution, and these kids they're all around this age, and they said, when we get older, we're getting even with these people. We're taking names. They know, right?
Yeah,
and
that's good. It was hard for me to judge it. I'm just looking at all these little kids, during 2020, 2021, and I'm just like, can the parents not see the eyes of troubled sadness, like going on with them there just walking around wearing the mask, which the only thing that matters to them is making mommy and daddy pleased with them when you're like that. It was horrifying. It was horrifying to me to go outside and see that every day.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And yeah, so these kids, I mean, they're preternaturally already advanced. And then you throw this, really kind of explosive event into their lives. And, when I saw them come on, I thought to myself, these are going to be the kids that are going to be like running the planet, right? So when you look at like where Pluto from Scorpio to Capricorn goes, so you have these millennials who are Pluto and Scorpio, and part of their job is destruction. Right? That's what millennials do, is they destroy things. They absolutely destroy things and burn things down. There's no middle ground with millennials. A Scorpio doesn't allow for shades of gray. It's black and white. And then the Gen Zers show up in 1996, and they have Pluto in Sag, and then Uranus in Aquarius, and Neptune in Aquarius, which is why some of them are so well versed in astrology, because Aquarius rules astrology. So they have it baked in. And Sagittarius, Pluto and Sagittarius, Gen Z, is about the introduction of new systems, new religion, new spirituality, and new law. Right? They're the ones that will bring down the new law from the heavens. And then you get Pluto and Capricorn, and they're the ones that will build the new world. They will be the new builders.
Right.
So
okay.
This is how this thing is supposed to work, right? But then you get these, satanic, globalist, Judeo, Zio, neocon
Yeah.
freaks, right?
Yeah.
And they've got a very different agenda. They've got a very different agenda, and they know inherently, because they follow astrology, right?
Mm-hmm.
They know inherently that this generation born under Pluto and Capricorn is going to take over and take over quickly. Like they know this, right? So what did they do? They've done everything in their power to interrupt this generation.
Yeah.
They've put masks on them.
Yeah.
They've vaccinated them. Right? Now they want to reassign their gender.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they're also very much connected to Baphomet. Right? Capricorn is Baphomet.
Right. Okay,
so,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they want to make them unisexual, right?
Yeah,
like this is their generation Baphomet. So, and if you look at even the name, right, Generation A, like theoretically that's your reset generation.
Right.
Like, and so it's in their best interest, the people that are running this bad reality matrix show, to subvert them, cut them off at the knee, because this is a generation. If they had just been allowed, to organically evolve, out of this generation, you start to see CEOs at the age of 18 and 19. Right? That's what you would see. That's how advanced they are.
Yeah. But those kids' parents, they were driven, they were turned into monsters. Their parents were turned into monsters and did that to them.
Those parents are millennials, by the way. So the millennials gave birth to Gen A. Gen X gave birth to Gen Z. Yep. And the baby boomers gave birth to Gen X.
Right. Yeah, of course. Right. And I'm like 1980. I'm like tail end of like Gen X or something like that.
You're Gen X. I would say you're Gen X.
Yeah, I'm Gen X. I'm Gen X, but I was almost like I was like the unfun side of Gen X, right? Like everybody I knew that like appreciated Gen X was just a few years older than me, about like 3 to 5 years older than me. They were like mid 70s born, right? So they were 70s babies. I was an 80s baby.
Yeah.
Right? So the 80s baby, and then I had all sorts of arrested development issues because I like dude, my chart, I'm Arrested Development Central. Saturn, Uranus, Pluto, Neptune, Jupiter. All the big guns in my chart retrograde at birth.
Yeah, that's an interesting vector.
Yeah, I'm coming into maturity now, but I still don't have all my shit together, but I feel better about the next time things fall apart for the first time in a long time is basically my attitude right now.
Yeah, you know what's interesting, Steve, is that if you go into your progressed chart,
right,
some of those planets may have gone direct.
They are. So a lot, yeah, like Saturn, I have looked at my progressed chart, and I think almost all of them are. In fact, I don't think that any planets that were direct have even gone retrograde yet, or maybe one of them has. I'm not sure, but yeah, because I was looking at that because I didn't pay attention much to progressed charts until more recently, and I think that's because everything felt like it was the same. The same state of being for me for 40 years, right? It wasn't until around that 2020-ish period that was forcing me to change regardless that I went and double checked. I was still I was still understanding what it meant. Like, oh, what's my sidereal chart, right? Because like I ride my sidereal chart too. I have I've looked at both. I play with both. It's almost like I kind of use my Western chart. I tell people this. I use my Western chart like it's my werewolf, right? It's like I'm chill in my Pisces mode, but when you piss me off, I'll go Aries, right? Like that's kind of how I operate in that respect. I love because I love the fact that in my Vedic chart, my moon sits in Mula. So I'm like tapped into galactic center. And it made me realize, oh, that's why I'm brilliant.
There you go.
Yeah, and as a Leo, I have to make that statement. That's why I'm brilliant, because it's a fifth house Aries in my tropical, right?
You're living up to it.
Yeah. So like, you know, if for me, it's just like I live and love and have fun with like knowing my chart better. I listened to your show, I think yesterday, and you said something about like Pluto in the 12th house people are about souls or something, right?
People would have Pluto in the 12th house. You know, if you just look at the sort of the examples like Donald Trump and Muhammad Ali,
right,
and Madonna, who come to mind, these are people who are absolutely, I believe Tom Brady as well,
right,
Pluto in the 12th house.
Yeah.
These are people who are, they're on some level, they're deeply driven, right? They're really driven. It's like they have something that's pushing them at a soul level, because the 12th house is the house of the soul, that a lot of people don't see or understand. You know, and it somehow translates itself into making their mark in the world in some ways. Because the other side of the chart, you have the 6th house, which is, you know, what you do every day.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So a lot of those people were very invested in a type of activity that they were obsessed about. Right. So if you look at Tom Brady, you know, TB12, training, right? Training. He got obsessed with training, and sort of the output for that would be the 6th house. Madonna became obsessed with training, dance, yoga, so she could, you know, do her shows and theoretically stay fit. And Muhammad Ali didn't always like to train, but he had to train. And so some of this is, in many regards, physical. And no one would ever accuse Donald Trump of training. But Trump probably at his height would probably play golf 200 plus times a year, right? I mean that's a very Plutonian. Pluto's all about obsession. Yeah. So what you get out of it is going to manifest itself in the 6th house, and of course, if somebody's got planets in the 12th, 10th house, or 9th house, you know, Pluto's either going to be squaring them or trining them. So there's something about Pluto in the 12th where it drives people at a soul level to succeed in the world. And the only way that I can, sort of summarize it is that they're driven. They're kind of obsessed and possessed with being something to leave their mark in some ways. Yeah. So that when they leave, and they return to the 12th house, that they've left a part of them in the world. Yep. No, not everybody that has Pluto in the 12th house is famous, but I guarantee you, if you run into somebody who has Pluto in the 12th house, they have an unmistakable character about something. Yeah. I got like I went through many phases of obsessions my whole life, right? You know, like things that I still carry. Like once I got through the obsession, it's because I got through it because I finally found what I was looking for in it, and I moved on to the next thing. And like, you know, my when I was a child, it was like, what's the coolest, most meaningful like cartoons or something that I can like get into, right? And you know, like I became like this huge like all about Voltron and Transformers and stuff like that, which then kind of evolved into being big about anime, and then like Unsolved Mysteries, X-Files stuff kind of kicked into gear, and you know, then I became all about conspiracy theories while also being all about personal spirituality, right? Because I was raised Catholic, and Catholicism was Catholicism, and I didn't want to have it. And then I kind of went
born again Christian, because you're a young boy, and you've only got so many options, and you're not with Arrested Development. I wasn't like, by the time I was an adult, I still wasn't an adult really, and
Right.
and
Yeah.
it was just something that I had to hate and struggle with myself, right? And I had known a little bit of astrology back then, but I knew very bad astrology and just knew certain things that people said about like Aries. They're like, oh, I guess I can have an excuse when I get angry now, or something like that, because I'm an Aries. And so, Pluto 12th house, and I'm an Aries. So guess what's in opposition to my Pluto? My sun in Aries.
Your son. Yeah.
So
Interesting.
So I'm leaving my mark, motherfucker.
There you go.
That's my thing. I'm a 5th house Aries, and so you, so yeah, that's my Leo energies. I got big Leo energies in that in my sidereal chart, and 12th house Pluto. I'm trying to do something big like that, and leave the mark, because it's
Right.
just it's just something about who I am as a soul.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, that's it. I mean, that's the deep transmission of Pluto from the 12th.
Excellent. Yeah. So people like you help me understand myself better. So thank you.
I'm here for you, Steve.
Excellent. So what else was I looking at here as I go over my show notes? We got 5 minutes. We got lots of time. Oh man, this has been a nice, thick conversation. So one of my questions was, it kind of organically morphed into it, was to how we deal with our personal traits, our personal transits, if you will, in the wake of global and national transitions and transits. Right. And we were kind of getting into that, but maybe we could talk more particularly about that. The generational stuff is obviously very key, because each generation kind of sets a frequency for a certain period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, what are we? How do? Can you frame that again for me?
Sure. All right. It's basically the simple thing, like we just talked about, like those kids that Gen Z or Gen A or whatever, that right when they were supposed to kickstart adulthood in 2020, they put them through the greatest humanitarian attack in known history. Yep. Right. And so so there was something that was going on with their generation, because their Pluto, their Saturn, and all that stuff had moved for a number of years. It had been 18 years or so in the making, which is a whole rotation of the North Node.
So if you go from 2009, when they start to show up, to 2020, they're not that old, right? So we're talking they're like 12 years old at that time, right? They're 11, 12 years old. That's when Gen A shows up. So they're not quite, they're just starting to come into puberty a little bit. They're older now, right? So we're talking 15 years old. And a lot of these 14 and 15-year-old Gen A kids actually follow Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
The Pied Piper. No, seriously, that's it. That is his demographic. 13, 14, and 15-year-old boys. My son is 19, and I asked him, I said, do you know who Andrew Tate is? He said, of course. I said, you follow him? He said, hell no. He said, who follows him? He goes, kids like 13, 14, 15 years old. So he is their Pied Piper, right? And Andrew Tate is a millennial, and he's also a Scorpio. So his Neptune and Uranus are in the sign of Capricorn. So he's going to lock in. Generationally, they'll lock in with their Pluto, right? But the thing that happened in 2020 is that Saturn went into Aquarius, and if you follow the historical transits of Saturn and Aquarius, every time since 1962, when Saturn went into Aquarius, every time Saturn has gone into Aquarius, there has been a type of paralytic shock, and there's this sense that the so-called elite are shutting down the possibility of people actually connecting and aligning and coming together. The first time that happened was in 1963 when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Saturn was in Aquarius. So we have this shock to the system, right?
Yeah.
And everything changes. Like the timeline changes. Johnson becomes president. MK Ultra kicks into high gear.
Mm-hmm.
And they subvert this energy, which is, again, if you go back to the Summer of Love, it was in the air, right? And what are they doing with it? They've
1 minute.
They've commandeered it. They siphoned it off. So that all happens with Saturn and Aquarius. The next time it happens is at the beginning of the Gulf War, Gulf War One. And if you look at the kind of the evolutionary arc, the 80s were this generation where the world started to become joined by satellite and cable, right? So you were young during the 80s, but maybe as a child you saw like Live Aid, which was one of these first global events where everybody was experiencing it simultaneously and having a very kind of So you have things like Farm Aid.
So Rob, we're gonna hit our break. Yeah. We're gonna hit our break right now. So so hold on to that thought, and at the top of the hour, we're gonna take care of it. You're listening to Robert Phoenix on my show. All right, guys, welcome back. It is the top of the hour on TFRLIVEDOTCOM. This is Steve Zerilath. You are listening to Trigenesis, and tonight we're with my very special guest, Robert Phoenix, and we've been going over some very important points in how we use astrology to help surf the psyche of the world and ourselves over the shifting times. And we've been looking at these different generations, what they're collectively going through on a personal level, as well as the world response to that in its reaction to the same transits occurring for them, as well as the agenda of the dark forces that manipulate the masses unaware. And so, Robert, I had to interrupt you at the end of your thoughts right there on the subject, but I want to give you the floor to not even wrap, just keep going. Just keep going on with your point. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So if you just go back to 1990, that's when Saturn goes into Aquarius. And we have this, again, even though Kennedy was decidedly American, he was a global president. And he had the ability to show up in more than just newsreels, but TV stations all over the world. And he was of course noted for his Ich ein Berliner speech. In Germany, right? So Kennedy was global. He was a global phenomenon, and so the world was, starting to kind of come together under one intel. It was an INSAT, the satellite or whatever, right? It was starting to kind of happen, and then of course we all began to experience something in a far more collective way during the '60s with this so-called revolution, right? Whether it's the United States or Paris or other countries, Italy was going through something similar. But then you get to this Gulf War thing, and then what happens? They hijack the energy, just like they hijacked the energy in 1962, 63, when Saturn goes into Aquarius, and you see what's called the coalition of the willing, right? So you have the world coming together, but they're coming together under the rubric of the New World Order, which is what George Bush actually makes his first New World Order speech during that time. That's all Saturn in Aquarius. And then fast forward, the next Saturn in Aquarius moment that we have is COVID-19 and George Floyd. Right, and now everybody is experiencing the wrath of Saturn globally, right? And you have these very officious people who aren't even in the government. Aquarius is not Capricorn. Even though at one point in time Saturn was home to Aquarius, it is not Capricorn. When you get into Aquarius, you get into things like NGOs. And think tanks and global foundations like the World Economic Forum, and so you have kind of this leadership by proxy and group mind. Like when you think of the EU, what's the first who's the first person that comes to your mind? Is it Ursula von der Leyen? Most people don't even know who she is. It's the EU, right?
Yeah.
And Tony Fauci was, even though, now here's what's interesting, Tony Fauci is a Capricorn. So he was born, he's 2 degrees Capricorn. So Tony Fauci is like the Hierophant and the high priest of COVID. Right?
Yeah,
he is, and so, but he's not a publicly elected official.
Yeah.
Right? And this is what happens during that Saturn in Aquarius. It was the rise of the group, or it was I don't know where you were, Steve, locally, but here where I live, all the policy of the city was really mapped out by the local hospital. Right? Whatever the hospital was reporting as cases or whatever, and getting on the phone and calling the mayor, they were mapping out the local response to COVID.
Right.
The mayor did not have an independent bone in his body. Right? So now you have non-elected officials like the general director of the hospital now making up local political policy. That's what happened with Saturn in Aquarius. We got a taste of that, and it didn't taste very good.
No,
right?
Yeah.
Because there's nobody you could just point your finger at and say, well, you're the person that did it. I mean, even with Trump and the COVID response team, like who the fuck is doing what, right?
Yeah,
like you point at Fauci.
Because most of our woes for that as an event were voluntary, were group voluntary, right? It's just like you're like people became afraid to do things the way they wanted to. In the beginning, it was just like, okay, fine, there's a pandemic, but why do I got to act like this? They're asking that question while they're still obeying because they can kind of tell, right? Because like if you see everybody in the public acting that way, you're going to be afraid that if you don't also do the same, these people that are scared of this thing are going to cause trouble for your business. So every small business had to capitulate to save itself, but also capitulation was destroying itself. At the same time, it was a nefarious, inescapable.
It's a great point. Absolutely.
Yeah. It was. There was they were, this was what I consider to be some sort of a harvesting of the negative psychic energy, because there was a certain madness for people that had a fictitious grip of reality from television, politics, their gossip circles, and their selfish, narcissistic whims, and all these other toxic traits of society in and of itself, threatening those toxic traits while at the same time inflammating them. And that is how you created these super commie Nazis that were running the zeitgeist in the psychic field, right? To make it terrible to, like unless your friend was consistently staying a truther that understood all this is bullshit kind of thing and said, come here, I want a hug. And you're like, yeah, I could use a hug right now. Fuck this mask. Right. Like those were the people that you stuck to if you were like us.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yes, absolutely. It was, during that time, Mars was in Aries, and I was feeling very feisty, like really, really, like I was in a big fuck you mood during that time.
Oh yeah.
And my girlfriend is like that too. She's even more fuck you than me. And and we would do stuff like we went to Costco in San Antonio, and San Antonio was run by a liberal mayor. And man, they were so, rigid when it came to the whole COVID thing. And we went to Costco, and we would do stuff like we would just walk into places without masks, and we would just dare people, dare them to like come at us, right?
Yeah.
So we walk into this Costco, and the dude lets us in. It's like he just lets us in, and the woman behind us, who of course is wearing a mask, and we can hear her.
Yeah.
She said, "Fuck, really?" and pointed at us. Really?
Yeah, I know. These like it's the inner Karen that was in all of these women, right? And a Karen is it's not just Karen, but it's also Qarin, which is an order of jinn, this demon possession.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're calling someone a Karen, you're calling them a certain kind of demon. And the short explanation of what a Karen demon is doesn't sound super nefarious until you put it into certain practical applications. Right. So that's, because I did the same thing, sometimes very solo. A couple of times, I got a couple of good friends that I bonded with in early 2021. I made a few friends through the bear community, and we would go all sorts of places without masks and make them kick us out as after we would debate them about it. And at one point we said like, hey, listen, just remember when they did the Nuremberg codes, they went after middle management because you got all these schmucks following like orders from like the governor's office or whatever, trying to boss us around. It's just like, dude, that's like not your jurisdiction, not your job. And there's a way to do this where you don't have to freaking tell me to do anything, but no, you'd rather harass my face, so we stuck to our guns, walked out of a number of places, but we were having a good time because we loved doing it in solidarity with one another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was, to me, it felt really enervating. It was like, okay, it's on. Like, it is on.
Yeah.
And we would do things like, there would be like maybe eight or nine of us, and we'd all meet in the parking lot at the HEB. And we'd all walk into the HEB without masks on. And we'd all try to like congregate near each other, right? Because it's one thing to go into a store and be the only person or only couple that doesn't have a mask on.
Yeah.
But if you got 8 or 9 people who were all in the same vicinity without a mask on, it's like, oh, look at these people without masks. Yeah. So we would do stuff like that. We would get together and be quietly subversive.
Yeah. For most of the pandemic, I couldn't find people to fight with me, right? So Aries goes alone, as you would figure. I also have my North Node conjunct Mars and Jupiter, so like I am very single focused with virtuous purpose. This is my hill to die on, if you will. Ooh.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so like I like to think that efforts from your attitude about it, my attitude about it, my friends, everyone else, that made a big difference that will always be unacknowledged by the masses, but at least we figured it out, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it felt like, this is it. It's time to be alive.
Yeah.
We're on now. This is our hill. And I actually kind of miss those days. I miss the immediacy of dealing
Right.
with traders that you know versus traders that you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. It was certainly like there's a lot of opportunities that could be had, you know? It's just like by the end of 2021, I had kind of died as a person, a major UWAJ event, by the end of 2021 as everything was looking dire. That's when I started working out and no longer being the Steve that you would have remembered from Revolution Radio. That's when I was dropping the weight and realizing how much of everything I hated about myself I was dropping at the same time. Right.
Right.
And within like 6 months, I had lost so much weight. I looked like a completely different person, acted like a completely different person. And, now I'm this that I am here. And it's just like, wow, I am still the best parts of myself through this journey. This is amazing. Right. And I wish that I was where I am at right now in March of 2020. Just because I could have fought back physically more effectively. Would have made a handful of different decisions.
That's your retrograde in action, right? So.
Right.
As,
Yeah.
As Aries Ram Dass once said, "Be here now." So, yeah.
Indeed. So, I want to now shift things a little bit here. After that, like, I think that was amazing. This little exchange we had, like, there's a lot of, I think, catharsis in the conversation. But now something that I think is fascinating. I don't know how many astrologers have been talking much about this, but probably the Leo King has, and I think maybe you have. But so we got the Mandela effect, right? The Mandela effect, for an astrologer, it's got to be kind of a weird mind warp because the night sky seems to look like our zodiac system all works, right? But the biggest Mandela effect is that we went from the Sagittarius arm to the Orion spur of the of the galaxy or whatever, right? We're in a different spot in the universe, right?
Yeah.
And yet it seems like every single constellation is still exactly where it's supposed to be. But I have also heard reports that certain stars of no consequence that were observable by astronomers have disappeared. Like, there's all these weird little things that coincide with the idea of that Mandela effect shift, but yet our sky is seemingly the same. What do you think's going on? Has the Mandela effect affected your astrology in any significant ways yet?
Not really. Yeah, I mean, I haven't done a reading for somebody that I thought had died.
Right.
I would say the answer to that would be no.
Okay. Yeah. Is right. That's one of the. It's kind of weird. It's like at the very least, it's very comforting to think that, like, okay, at this point, a Mandela effect has changed where we are in the universe, but it hasn't changed our stars, which tells you something about our stars and what the universe is. But then also it gives us the, like, you might be able to bank that Mandela effect will not shake astrology, or it chooses not to shake astrology, or something to that effect. What do you think?
Yeah, it's really, to me, astrology is really weird. And there are things about astrology that at a certain level I know inside and out. And there are other things about astrology, it's like I'd be really hard pressed to tell you how it works. And I'm being completely transparent here. Like, I know that there are perturbations in the field. I know that that's how they discovered planets, right? Like, they see a wobble in Uranus, and so therefore they have this idea that Neptune is somewhere just beyond the horizon. And sure enough, right? So we can see like the effect of planets on each other. Like, that is part of the astronomical game, right? But if you really boil it down and you think about, well, theoretically, Pluto is way the hell out there, and it's been reduced to kind of an exoplanet, but I still think it's a planet. And if you look at depictions of Pluto, it looks a little deformed, right? It's like, it reminds me of Hephaestus, like the god of the underworld, who's got a short leg and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so we can speculate that, yeah, okay, there's gravitational fields, and these are energy bodies, and this is what Rudolf Steiner talks about, Edgar Casey talks about the influence of planets in this way, right? We can have that kind of conversation, but then when you translate it into epochs and eras and um, you know generational astrology, and even in personal charts. Like, for instance, I get a lot of flack from people who say, well, you keep it, Placidus is, it's bullshit. Sidereal is the way to go. Like,
Right.
and it's like, okay, have you ever done any Placidus and sidereal comparisons to see if your theory actually works? And most times people have not done that. So I said, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So if you go back to 2001, on September 11th, the moon was in Gemini, right? So we're talking twin towers. Where was Saturn? Saturn was in the sign of Gemini during that time, right? If you go into sidereal, Saturn's in Taurus. It doesn't work, right? Like, when you look at the twin towers and Saturn in Gemini and the collapsing of the towers, and out of two towers, one rises. That is Placidus mind candy. You can just track it and chart it because you have an event, right, that takes place.
Yeah.
Summer, yeah. So
yeah, they would start, like, I think the sidereal guys, they have the opportunity to get into the weeds because of the nakshatra system, right? So they can look, they'll probably find the star in Taurus that tells the story that way, right? And it will, because both systems work, right? Like, I'm a big fan of KRS one. He's like that. He's a really awesome Vedic astrologer who speaks like excellent English. He is friends with Leo King. You know who I'm talking about, right?
I think so.
Raj, I think his name Raj Patel or something like that. He's very good. He is very good. Yeah. He's my favorite sidereal guy. Right? And like, at the end of the day, it's like, I get it. If you look at the literal placement in the sky, sidereal is where it is literally placed. But with the interesting thing with the tropical system is that, like, the interpretation of the signs has changed a bit, right? And so, like, Cancer is described with different qualities in tropical, right? So the shift of the frequency of these signs is what gets actually honored in the tropical system because of, I guess, what they were, right? Like, it's a little confusing because I thought it was the other way around. I thought that sidereal was the one that was not the way the sky was today, because I thought the point was we don't have a sidereal spin on our axis. So why would we be using sidereal as where the planets literally are? And it confused me for years.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. I don't have a beef with sidereal astrologers or people that follow sidereal systems.
Right. We should all be getting along. It's a different way of doing things. That's.
But sidereal people will have a beef with Placidus because a lot of sidereal people are also flat earthers. And
interesting.
I don't look. Is the Earth flat? Is it round? Does anybody really, really know? Does anybody really know? Right? Like
Right.
you can make a really good argument on both sides,
Right. It's a
and
question of
and
can
I'm
you
not and I'm
debunk?
and I'm not going to
Yeah.
get in the weeds around it.
Right, right. It often gets to
Yeah,
the question of can you debunk the Greek mathematicians that calculated it all out back in the day, and then retroactively we alleged to figure out that they were right. Because that's all like everybody says, oh, this goes back to these Greeks, right? And all the Greeks did was measure shadows and make assumptions.
yeah, that's right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, yeah. Is
Totally right.
and you
Yeah,
know like and it's that they were mathematicians. And like people will say, like, yeah, round Earth. That's like, Christians are the ones that believe the Earth is flat. Da 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 da. Look at how they defended flat Earth when the church was in charge, right? It was just like, and it was just like, back in the day, in pagan times, there were non-believers. They just didn't have a label. They were just people that just didn't believe in things. You're doing
yeah,
things as a mathematician, and your math supersedes your belief in even Hermes, right? Who would be one of the gods that would be helping you get there, because you're talking about Greeks, then you're talking about Egyptians, you're talking about math, you're talking about Ma'at, right? And then it depends on what your sect and the agenda of your sect is doing, right? Like, it's
yeah.
funny how, like, some people forget that Pythagoras was a cult leader.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So that's great that you actually brought up the flat Earth thing. That was going to be one of my questions, because I was just getting into some of these more cosmological things. I did want to ask because we can all agree that the moon is an anomaly, whether you think it's a flat, a hologram, something that we did actually land on, or whatever. The moon is weird, right? So
Yeah, it is. It is
so
very strange.
as an astrologer, one who look, you told us your origin, like you're an intuitive that has really enhanced your intuitive abilities through astrology, and that's part of what makes you such a rock star in this game, my friend. So you, the moon, intuition, talk.
Well, I don't think the moon was originally here. There are accounts of oral tradition and some written transcripts where there's no there's no description of the moon in the sky,
Hmm.
and um, this is my belief. Um, I believe that at that time there was no moon. The Earth looked very different.
Hmm.
It would resemble something very much like the Garden of Eden, and that everything was very lush
Right.
and large. Like things were big, trees were big, people were probably big, and
Yeah.
the light in the sky did not emanate from our sun. The light in the sky emanated from Saturn,
Right.
which was our original sun, and the sky was filled with a purple magenta hue most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Yeah,
was a
we were
very
living in a
different
black
world.
light universe, more like Avatar.
Absolutely, absolutely, and the oxygen content was probably
Yeah, yeah.
much higher, and all the other um, uh, you know elements, nitrogen much higher,
Yes.
carbon. So everything was
Yeah.
like supercharged
Yeah, yeah. I'm
during
not. I'm not going to
during
use the
this period.
terminology. I'm not going to use the terminology from a said figure, but you can look at the sources that wrote about these determinations themselves based on ancient records and different ways of looking at like like because like that's my feeling on it too. Is that that's where things once were at, and yeah, the idea that the moon came in later is fascinating, and yeah,
Yeah,
what do you think they brought the moon in
they
for?
brought the moon in, and
Yeah.
they put us in a new cycle of
Oh,
time. And oh, I'm sorry.
yeah. You know what? Let's take the break right here. I kind of mistimed this segment, We'll be right back, folks. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Sorry if any of that got cut off at the end. We were so in the zone, I forgot to track my timer. But I think it's probably gonna line up just right when we get it all put together. Welcome back. It is Trigenesis with Steve Zerilath, and this is the last segment of the show. So for the next 25 or so minutes, we're in some deep dive-ins on some cosmologies, and I had to interrupt Robert in the middle of an excellent point about particularly the moon and the sun, and how things were different, right? So like the sun the sun would have been brought in with the moon then, or do you think that these things came independently and we had these weird times where we had an incomplete system like we know today?
I think the moon was brought here. It's artificial. That's my take on it. It has a very unique relationship with the planet Saturn in that they are both engaged in 29 and a half year cycles, 29 and a half cycles. So the moon is engaged in a 29 and a half cycle, right? So we go from new to full and then back to new in that 29 and a half years, or 29 and a half days, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Saturn is the same way. Saturn has a 29 and a half year cycle. And then you look at the two tropics. You have the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn. So, they're linked in a very interesting way. But again, this is my belief. Saturn probably also didn't have those rings, right? And the rings, the rings dampened Saturn's power.
Right.
Right now, where our sun comes in, I don't have a genesis story for our sun like the one that we're currently being scorched by now.
Right.
Right. But something happened out there in the firmament or the cosmos, and some of it probably had to do with the planet Marduk. Which is part of the Kuiper Belt, right? All those asteroids theoretically were this planet, right? And so the story kind of goes like this, right? Like there was a war between Mars and Marduk, and then Marduk winds up being obliterated and becomes the Kuiper Belt, this asteroid belt, and then there's this orbital shift in the solar system, and originally Mars occupied what's called at this time it's called the cradle orbit, right? And then Mars slides past the cradle orbit, and everything moves like one elliptic to the right, so to speak. Now I don't know where this is in relationship to the moon and Saturn. It's just another part of our cosmic story. But when you look at the moon, you see that there are things like tides, and the whole topography of the planet changes, and I'll just take kind of a bit of a metaphysical philosophical belief that the people that were here prior to the arrival of the moon were relatives of Methuselah. They lived quite long. When the Bible goes through the different names and years associated with those names, I don't think it's a fairy tale, right? So by the time you get to Abraham, who lives at about 150, and of course you have the birth of the Abrahamic religions during that time, we're on the downside of a really long run, and I think the moon plays a role in that, and the level of oxygen on the planet is also part of the story where people don't live as long. And we probably didn't have to eat animals and do any of that stuff in a much more oxygen-rich, oxygen-dense planet. Who knows? Maybe we ate fruit or whatever, right? And mono, was this purple light, that nurtured us. And something shifted,
right?
And And one of the the Egyptian name for the moon is called Sin, right? It's
Yeah.
a very interesting character.
Yeah, Mount
And
Sinai is named after it. Yeah.
that's right, exactly. Yeah, and there's this theoretical interesting relation with the sun and the moon, and the sun being a portal, and
Yeah.
the moon, catching catching people, and the
Yeah.
whole idea is that back when they had the pyramids and they were shaking and baking, right? That the tops of the pyramids would be open, and then you would have this transmigration of the souls through the sun,
Right.
and then
Right.
the moon would divert them into the pyramids so that they could theoretically revive the people who were in the sarcophagi, right? They would receive a
Right.
new soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. The soul transition process. I like that. That's definitely something. I can't find any intuitive people that don't see that souls die and then they go to the moon before they go anywhere else. Often they're saying that there's some sort of slave colony on the dark side of the moon. Um, and yeah, like this is people that I know. A lot of these people uniform have done their good independent research and are not shills for anything. Like I'll give the shout out to Ra Castaldo, who also has a show on here, The Eye of Ra, and he'll remote view the moon and say stuff like that, and then that corresponds with all sorts of other people that I've heard. So yeah, because another Mandela effect, which may suggest that the sun and moon have shifted positions, is that Cheshire moons are now a thing, where the moon is waxing or waning on the bottom, and it's making a big white smile.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that means that there's a new orientation that occurs from time to time between the sun and the moon during its phasing periods when it's close to new.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So my theory is, with everything that you talked about, that I think Earth is what's left of Marduk. Because let's just
You know what? That sounds like a fit.
that's my point, right? Because think about it. Look at all the other non-gas giants in our alleged system, right? Mars, perfect sphere. Venus, perfect sphere. Pluto, perfect sphere. So on and so forth, right? Earth, oblique spheroid. You take all the water off of Earth, it looks like an asteroid. We are an asteroid with mud and water thrown on us and given a firmament to sustain an atmosphere, gravity, and life. So that's what I think. I think we are Marduk's life support. We're what's left of Marduk.
Yeah.
They even, and you know what? Soft disclosure. I love soft disclosure stuff. If anybody ever watched later seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which was on CBS because they own Disney, right? It was part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The agents go to outer space in they go to the future where Earth is destroyed, and the only thing that's left of it is this one side of it. So it's turned into a flat Earth because it was destroyed, and it's got gravity quakes, so you can't live on the surface of it, and so everybody is living on an asteroid that's been turned into a prison by the private company of the Kree alien, where the blue aliens, right? And the blue aliens, the Vedic gods have the blue skin. It gets into you can make all your assertions about origin stories from that, right? And I was just looking at the way they set up that whole future for Earth, and I was just like, that's kind of what I think happened to Marduk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it could very well be, Yeah. By the way, Pluto is not a perfect sphere. Pluto is freaking weird when you look at it. It looks like somebody took a chunk out of it, right? Like some enormous galactic dragon took a chunk out of Pluto. It's a
Right,
very
right.
odd, very odd planet.
Yeah. Well, when I say
But
perfect
yeah,
sphere, I mean like it's still round all around. It's got its bumps and its scratches.
right.
But Earth,
Yeah,
you've got the big ass mountains and the deep ass abyss, right? You just got to take the
yeah,
water off of
yeah.
Earth to understand, right? Because there are no oceans on these other planets.
Right, right. Although,
Yeah.
what is the moon on Jupiter that has some water? What is it? Is it Io? Is it Io that it looks like it has some?
Maybe.
Um,
I
yeah,
remember.
I think it might be Io.
Yeah, yeah. If that's the one moon that's got water on it, then that's like I heard a theory that octopus come from this moon that's got water on it, and somehow they got here in space. Some weird kind of panspermia that octopus are capable of.
The octopus are so bizarre, aren't they?
They are bizarre, and I love them. I love the one video of the chick in the
Yeah,
tank, and she's like cleaning this tank, and this little octopus the size of a puppy is just playing with her. It just wants to horse around and stuff. It goes around on Facebook. This video, it's the cutest damn thing ever, right?
yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean like they're creepy, but they're very smart. They can be friends. They're very cool.
They're incredibly
Yeah,
smart.
yeah, yeah. As a Lovecraft
I
fan, I
remember
have to love
seeing
the
what
octopus.
it was an octopus video where it was stuck somewhere, and it was some guy in a fishing boat that freed it, and the awareness of the octopus was frightening.
Mm,
Frightening in a good way.
yeah,
As it was ready to kind of slink off the boat, he turned and looked at the guy, and you could tell that this octopus was transmitting some form of gratitude.
oh yeah,
Um,
yeah,
we slid off the side of the boat. Really fascinating.
yeah. In the manner in which I do my shamanic work, it's just like I talk to animals just as a given. Like I work in a garden store, like flowers everywhere. There's a bee. I'm like, "Hi, bee. How you doing?" Right? I see a hornet. I'm just
Right? Yeah.
like hornet, leave me the f alone. Seriously, like you're over there, I'm over here. Right? Like this is what I do on a regular basis, and I am understanding that there is an animal spirit there, and I'm hoping that it works on a spirit to spirit communication level. It's still something that I'm accustoming myself to and tuning myself to, but I get lots of practice because I have a pet iguana.
Yeah. Yeah. I love lizards. I think they're really interesting. Yeah. I had this. I was living in this house in Fredericksburg, and it had a pretty nice patio. And during COVID, my gym was closed, so I bought a bunch of scrapped up some gym equipment, which was very hard to find during that time. So I built a gym out there, nothing fancy, but I had a gym. And under the eaves of the patio, there were, all of these hornets' nests.
Mm.
And we get these big red hornets out here and wasps. And I would just talk to these critters and say, I'm not going to do anything to you. Right? You can stay here. I'm not going to remove your nests. I'm going to be back here, and I'm going to work out, lift weights, but I will not do anything. And they left me alone.
Right.
Like they never felt threatened. Every now and then, maybe one would kind of buzz around me a
Yeah.
little bit. I would just say, remember our deal. I'm not going to do anything to you. And I worked out there for a year in that.
Yeah.
And especially during the spring, the summer, where they were warm and they were buzzing. Never once did I encounter any problems
Right.
with these critters. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't figured out how to tell mosquitoes the fuck off yet. That would be my favorite talent for summer.
Yeah,
Um,
dude. If you could figure that, that's like a major step towards enlightenment. it.
I know,
To figure that
right?
out.
Because like, dude, how am I
Yeah.
supposed to meditate and get a tan if you keep biting my back?
Yeah, right, exactly. I forget who it was. It might have actually been Ram Dass, where he was meditating, and um, a mosquito came and landed on him, and he sat there and he watched the mosquito, just slam his proboscis right into him,
Yeah.
and watched it just gorge on his blood and fill up. Right, he observed the whole thing.
Yeah.
Now I'm pretty sure it was Ram Dass. Now I don't know if that changes relationship with mosquitoes forever, but it seems like you'd have to have that kind of presence of mind in order to shift your relationship with that thing.
Yeah, I guess that's something that I can work with. The only thing that came close was last year. I was trying to do some qigong in the park after I had done like a nice long jog or whatever. So I'm just in my shorts. I'm in my shorts. I got my shoes off. I'm earthing for this, with my shirt off, and they just keep biting. And twice I tried asking them as spirits, and they ignored me. So I tried a little bit of my berserker talents that I may have latently, and I just roared like a bear, and it spooked a deer that was off in the corner. And but it did seem to scare off all the bugs, and I was able to get through the session after roaring. So that worked.
When in doubt, roar it out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I apologized to the deer, saying, "Sorry, it had to be done. I didn't know you were there."
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. But this is fun, right? Just like we're living a mystical life. People on this side now. There's so many of us, and like I just feel bad for people that just are still doing the 9 to 5 thing after all of this, right? It's like there's some real magic out there. Why don't you like get into it for yourself?
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what's the alternative? The
Yeah.
alternative is to succumb to the thumb, right?
Right.
And just
Exactly.
just get great. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you may as well craft your own journey and do your best to experience wonder and magic,
Yeah.
and possess some character along the way.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, like I work with these, I work with my pagan gods, not just the Germanic Norse ones, a few others, and it's just like none of that relationship with those gods puts me out of any of the 10 Commandments except for the first one, right?
yeah,
And I'm not even like it's not even worship. It's just like I had Anubis appear to me in a dream, Rob, right? And I gave Anubis a bow and I stepped backwards because I was unaware of my surroundings for the moment, and I went lucid to step back and take it in, not to step back because I was being a coward. Plus, I bowed out of respect. Anubis doesn't like it when people subjugate themselves to him. I find out later through a friend who has better connections with the deity, because he sicks his jackal type dog on me. He had a dog that was like his head, right? And he sicked it on me because I stepped away and I bowed before him instead of meeting him face to face, mano a mano, right? And like he did that to teach me a lesson, and that shook me out of the dream anyway, right? So it's like
yeah,
it's nothing like having a relationship with the Creator, and it's nothing like having a relationship with the biblical version of Yahweh, right? And it
yeah.
doesn't mean that you have to fall into sin like the way we get from the satanic story.
That's right. Yeah, and yeah. I mean, I think that God, when I think of really religious Christian people, my experience with them, this is not a judgment, is that they don't really experience God outside the box,
Yeah.
right? Like God lives in a box, and they don't really experience God outside the box. And what I mean by that is, um, you know, and perhaps I might be misspeaking for some of them, but somebody who's deeply engaged in a Christian relationship with the world and God being the creator of this world, you would look at nature and you would see nature as an extension of the divine and the deity, and everything would be interconnected. And the animism that pagans would venerate and celebrate would not be that much different than attributing those things to a monotheistic God. I mean, it would be very, very similar in some ways.
Well,
All
yeah.
you're getting
I mean,
caught up in
it's all an
is the
appropriation of
language.
it.
Yeah, and you're just getting caught up in the because a real Christian would understand this. They would be in awe of the wonder of nature and creation, right? And that's not my experience with a lot of Christians. And they operate inside the box, and they operate
Yeah.
inside of commandments. And I think that honestly, it's probably better if people have a religion, because in many cases, those religions can give them morals and values,
Right.
and they can live within inside society. Whatever you think of the Nation of Islam, a lot of those guys in the Nation of Islam were at one point in time delinquents and gangbangers,
Right.
and they were brought in, and Elijah Muhammad, gave them spiritual principles,
Right.
and self-respect, right? So whatever you think of, some of these religions, they do perform a function and a role.
Yeah. Hey, look,
look!
I got my
Yeah.
funny thing is that although I wouldn't be a henotheist, I think people should just be henotheistic. I think that would solve all the problems for the currently monotheistic minded people. It's
Yeah.
because guess what? Your first commandment phrases it appropriately because it's not dismissing the existence of other gods. It's saying you want to have a soul contract with this God. And that's why you have a
Right.
commandment. No other gods before me. Not false gods, not demons imposturing themselves as gods. It's just other gods. There are other gods, right? And everybody understands who actually gets occult esoteric enough about Yahweh. The pagan original Yahweh was a minor war and fertility god in Babylon, Sumer, whatever, who wanted to break from everyone else because they were falling into psychosis. And so a very particular cult of Semitic people with just that god and his wife, who then got occulted, left.
Yeah, interesting. I just looked up the definition of henotheism, and Max Mueller was the creator of the term. And it's this little thing from the Northern Arizona University. It says that to mean devotion to a single primary God, while accepting the existence or possible existence of other deities. Mueller stated that henotheism means monotheism in principle and polytheism in fact.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you were aware of that.
Yeah, exactly. Like you
sentence.
Yeah, exactly. That's what that's exactly the context I was talking about. That is the exact proper definition of henotheist. And that's what I mean, right? It's just okay, you don't like all this stuff because you think everything's going to turn into a Bacchus ritual, okay? We get it. You don't want to corrupt the youth and you want to keep yourself pure. Beautiful stuff. I like doing that most of the time, although once in a while I need to go to the club. Now, you got that, whatever it means to you, and you don't have to have your relationship with your God, who is very powerful, be a threat to you and to the world, and you don't have to feel paranoid about other people and other God. Like Christians will get very insecure and paranoid because they don't trust the people with different values around them, and they're worried about what their children are going to get exposed to. Now, we got 45 seconds left to the show. Robert, it has been amazing having you on. Please plug yourself. If you want to plug your CBD gummies in the next 30 seconds, go for it.
First of all, Europa is the moon that has water that orbits Jupiter.
Excellent. Okay.
RobertPhoenix.com is my website. If you're interested in scheduling a reading with me, you can go there and do that. I have a channel on YouTube called The 11th House, and I curate content on that frequently. If you're interested in astrology, my Sunday night show airs at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time on The 11th House on YouTube. I also do Astro Weather Tuesday through Thursday on that same channel. That's at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, where I look at the astrology of the day.
Yep.
And kind of give people a heads up as to what's happening. And I'm on Twitter, AstroPhoenix9, pretty active on Twitter. And those are places to find me.
Excellent.
And yeah, thanks for having me on, Steve. It's been really cool, and I think you do a great job here. And I just wish you more and more success as you expand your personal mythos.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. All right. I will see you later. Let's do this again sometime. And everybody else, I'll see you next week. Have a good night.